Beyond the last hill, where the road turns to grass and the grass turns to wildflowers, there was an orchard.
The apple trees stood in long, patient rows, their branches heavy with fruit, their leaves silver under the moon.
An old stone wall ran around the orchard, and the gate was wooden and unpainted, and it swung open with a sound like a sigh. In the middle of the orchard stood a small stone house, and its windows glowed with the softest amber light. Inside, a kettle hummed on the iron stove, and the smell of apples and cinnamon filled every corner of the room. An old woman lived there, a woman whose hair was the color of dry grass, whose hands were never still, whose smile was slow and warm. Her name was Mara, and she had lived in the orchard house her whole life, 60 years of springs and autumns, of blossom and fruit. She had been born in this house, in the small bedroom above the kitchen, on a night when the apple blossom was thick on the trees. Her father had planted the first rows of trees the year she was born, and she had grown up with them, child and trees together.
She knew every tree by name, or by the shape of its branch, or by the taste of its fruit, and the trees knew her.
Old Bessie, the tree by the gate, had given her first apple, and she remembered the taste still, sharp and sweet and full of sun. The orchard had seen her marry, and seen her husband laid to rest under the great oak at the edge of the field. It had seen her children grow and leave, one to the city, one to the sea, and it had seen them return, summer after summer. Now the children were grown, with children of their own, and in the summer the orchard was full of voices and laughter. But tonight was not summer. Tonight the moon was high and full, and the orchard lay silver and still, and Mara sat alone by her window. The kettle hummed, and the stove glowed, and she had a bowl of apples in her lap, polishing each one until it shone like a lantern. She liked the polishing best of all the evening tasks, because it was slow, and it gave her hands something to do, and her mind somewhere to go.
She thought about the day that had passed, a day of mending fences and gathering windfalls and sweeping the stone path.
It had been a good day, a quiet day, and now the evening had settled over the orchard like a hand laid gently on a sleeping child. The moon came through the window and laid a silver square on the floor, and the dust motes drifted through it like slow snow. She peeled an apple with a small, careful knife, and the peel came off in one long, perfect ribbon, and she hung it by the stove. The peel would dry there through the winter, and in the spring she would crumble it into the last of the winter tea. Outside, the wind moved through the orchard, and the leaves made a sound like the sea heard from very far away. One apple fell from a branch, soft as a word, and rolled a little way, and stopped in the grass, and the night closed over it. The moon rose higher, and the orchard filled with a pale green light, the light of a world seen through deep water. Mara poured herself a cup of tea, and the steam rose in a slow spiral, and the room smelled of warm apples and old books. Her tea was apple tea, made from the windfall apples and the last of the summer mint, and it tasted of the orchard itself.
She sat by the window, wrapped in a shawl the color of autumn, and she watched her trees breathe in the moonlight.
The trees were sleeping, she knew. The way all good things sleep, their roots deep in the dark earth, their branches resting.
She thought about the spring, when the blossom would come pink and white, covering the orchard like a soft, fragrant snow. She thought about the bees which would come with the blossom and fill the orchard with their low, busy song. She thought about the summer when the fruit would swell, green at first, then gold, then red, heavy on the bough.
And she thought about the harvest, which was the best time, when the whole village came to help, and the air was full of apples and laughter.
The village children would climb the trees and fill their shirts with apples, and she would scold them gently and give them cider. She kept the cider in the cellar, in oak barrels, and it was sweet and golden and made the children sleepy.
Every year, at the end of the harvest, she made 1 barrel of cider just for the children and called it the Sleepy Barrel.
The children knew about the sleepy barrel, and they talked about it all year, and they measured the year by how long it was until harvest. She smiled at the thought, and the fire in the stove settled, and the logs settled with it, and the room was full of small, contented sounds. She thought about her husband, who had loved the orchard almost as much as she had, and who had taught her to graft a branch.
He had shown her 40 years ago how to take a cutting from one tree and join it to another so that one tree could bear 2 kinds of fruit.
There was a tree by the gate, Old Bessie, that bore both red and golden apples, and it was her husband's gift to her.
She touched the window, and the glass was cool, and beyond it, the moonlight lay on the orchard like a silver tide.
She remembered the night he had died in the autumn when the leaves were falling, and he had asked her to keep the orchard wild.
He had said that an orchard should be allowed to be a little wild, that the wildness was what made the fruit sweet.
She had kept his promise, and the orchard had grown a little wild, and the fruit was the sweetest in the valley. The wild apple trees at the edge of the field still bore their small, sharp fruit, and the birds ate them, and the cider was better for them. She finished her tea and set the cup down and took up another apple, and the moon moved a little higher in the sky. The fire had burned down to a bed of coals, and the room was warm and dim, and the shadows of the branches moved on the ceiling. She thought about the people who had passed through her life, the way people pass through an orchard, picking this fruit, admiring that tree. There had been a traveler once, years ago, who had stopped at her gate and asked for water, and she had given him water and an apple.
He had sat on her bench and eaten the apple, and he had said it was the best apple he had ever eaten, and she had believed him. He had gone on his way, and she had never seen him again, but she still thought of him sometimes and hoped the road had been kind.
There had been a young couple, the summer before last, who had asked if they could sit in the orchard and read.
They had sat under Old Bessie for an hour, reading to each other, their voices low and warm, and then they had left, holding hands.
She liked to think that the orchard gave people what they needed: a little peace, a little shade, a little sweetness. The kettle sang again, and she poured another cup, and the steam rose, and she breathed it in, and the room was full of peace. She thought about the seasons of the orchard, and how each one had its own voice, its own smell, its own way of being. In winter, the orchard was bare and still, and the trees stood like dark lace against the white fields, and the silence was deep as a well. She would walk the rows in winter, checking the young trees, wrapping their trunks against the cold, talking to them in a low voice. In early spring, the
the sap would rise, and the buds would swell, and she would walk the orchard every morning, watching for the first green.
Then the blossom would come, and the orchard would be a cloud of pink and white, and the air would be thick with the hum of bees.
The blossom only lasted a little while, and she would sit on her bench and watch it. And she never tired of it, not in 60 years. In summer, the orchard was green and deep, and the children came, and the air was full of their voices, and the apples grew fat and gold.
And in autumn, the harvest, the best time, when the whole valley smelled of apples, and the cider press ran from dawn until dark.
She thought about the cider press, which lived in the barn, a great oak and iron thing that her great-grandfather had built.
It had pressed the apples of 4 generations, and its wood was dark and polished where 100 hands had held it. Every harvest, she would feed the apples into its hopper, and the press would groan, and the sweet juice would run into the waiting barrels.
The smell of fresh cider, sharp and sweet and alive, was the smell of autumn itself, and it brought the whole village to her gate.
She thought about the harvest festival, which the village held every October, when the last apples were gathered and the barrels were tapped.
Lanterns were hung in the trees, and tables were set under the great oak, and the whole village came, from the oldest to the smallest.
There was music and dancing and pies, and the children ran between the trees with apple in their hands and joy in their eyes.
And at the end of the evening, when the lanterns guttered and the music softened, she would tell the children one story, the same story every year. It was the story of the first apple tree, the one that grew from a seed that fell from a bird's beak onto the bare hillside. The bird had carried the seed from a far country and had dropped it here in this valley, and the seed had taken root. And from that one tree, she said, had come all the orchards of the valley, all the apples, all the cider, all the harvests. The children listened with their mouths full of pie, and they believed it, and she believed it too, because it was true enough.
She thought about her parents, who had loved this orchard, and who were buried under the old oak, side by side, facing the trees.
Her father had planted the orchard, and her mother had kept the house. And between them, they had made a world of apples and warmth.
She still had her mother's recipe book, written in her mother's careful hand, and she read it the way other people read poetry. Apple pie, apple cake, apple butter, apple brandy, apple cider, apple tea. The book was a hymn to the apple in all its forms. She had never changed a single recipe, because they were perfect, and perfection should not be touched. She thought about the night, 60 years ago, when she had first come to this house as a young bride, afraid and full of hope.
Her husband had carried her over the threshold, and the kitchen had been full of lantern light, and the house had smelled of new wood and promise.
She had stood in this very kitchen, and she had thought, "This will be my home, and I will grow old here." And she had grown old here, and the house had grown old with her, and the orchard had grown tall and strong around them both.
The moon had risen and set over this orchard 10,000 times, and she had watched it from this window 1,000 of those times.
And still it surprised her. The moon, the way it silvered the leaves, the way it turned the grass to water, the way it made the night kind. She stood and walked to the door,
and opened it, and the cool night air came in, carrying the smell of grass and earth and apples.
She stepped out onto the stone path, and the moon was so bright that she did not need her lamp, and she walked a little way into the orchard.
The trees stood around her, silver and patient, and the grass was cool under her bare feet, and the night was full of the smell of ripening fruit.
She put her hand on the trunk of old Bessie, and the bark was warm from the day, and she could feel the slow pulse of the tree.
In the distance, beyond the wall, a dog barked once and then was quiet, and the night closed over the sound like water.
She walked back to the house, and the lamp glowed in the window, and the door welcomed her back with its familiar creak.
She latched the door, and it clicked, soft as a lid on a jar, and she stood for a moment in the warm, apple-smelling dark. The fire was a bed of red coals, and she banked it for the night, and the coals glowed like a sleeping eye.
She climbed the narrow stairs to her bedroom, and the stairs creaked in their old, familiar voice, and the house held her up.
Her bed was high and soft, piled with quilts that her mother had made, and she sank into them the way a leaf sinks into still water.
She lay on her back, and the ceiling was dim, and the shadows of the branches moved across it in their slow, patient dance.
She closed her eyes, and she could still smell the apples and the mint and the wood smoke, the whole quiet grammar of her life. In her dream, she was young again, and the orchard was full of blossom, and her husband was alive, and the children were small.
She walked between the rows of trees, and the blossom fell like snow. And her husband was waiting for her at the old oak.
He smiled, and he held out an apple, red and perfect, and she took it, and the whole orchard was golden and full of light.
She woke for a moment, and the moon was at the window, and the room was silver, and she could hear the slow breathing of the night.
She turned on her side, and the quilt settled, and she slept again. And the dream returned, and the blossom fell, and he was there.
The night went on, and the orchard kept its long, quiet watch, the trees patient as grandmothers, the stream running its endless, gentle sentence.
And when the first light came, gray and soft over the hills, the orchard would wake, and the birds would begin, and the day would begin.
But for now, there was only the moon, and the warmth, and the smell of apples, and the deep, safe sleep of the old stone house.
And Mara slept, and the trees slept, and the apples shone in their bowl in the kitchen below, like small, patient lanterns in the dark.